All right, so I'm going to do both the creative analysis and the organization lecture in the same video here. I know this is a big week. I'm asking of you yet another analysis about Their Eyes Were Watching God, but then on the other hand, you're doing that work with your own novels. And so it is a lot. I'm using Their Eyes Were Watching God as a model, and my paper model exists in that service as well, just in an attempt to show you how you would put all this together. So for the creative analysis, we're going to look at contrasts in a text, but I'm also going to use this to talk about evidence and the power of evidence for the arguments that you're making. All right, so this is a skill we've done once before. We did it with Lord of the Flies. We are looking again at contrasts in a text, and I like this because it's very evidence-driven, which is the point of this week. What are contrasts for? They are chances to explore tension. Contrasts are part of the human experience, and we shouldn't shy away from them. We should pour into them. What will deepen your observations? There will necessarily be something similar about the two things you've encountered in your reading, and that is where you'll find some really interesting assertions to make. How will you find those observations, those ideas that you want to explore in contrasts? You're looking for diction, sentence structure, plot details, sure, and then lastly, the figurative language that an author might use to show you they're trying to pull two things together. So those are contrasts, but I'm going to use some examples to try to help you see what this is all about. So in Their Eyes Were Watching God, we're looking at contrasts. What is the main contrast I'm going to consider for my model? Joe Stark's and tea cake in Janie's life. There is a great tension between them, a tightness she must reconcile. What does this tension tell us about the men, about Janie, and about the very nature of loving, right? Because it always is going to go big. You either start big and zoom in, or you start tight and then you zoom out. When I think about these two men, it is easy to imagine making all sorts of assertions, conclusions, right? Drawing out my ideas by just saying what I believe. And indeed, I have a lot of beliefs about them. But a good piece of argument will always couch it in very specific things in the language. And that is the point of this whole week. I want us to always be seeking evidence. And so I'm looking for what is happening with these two guys. In order to do that, I have got to find a couple of scenes that I'm going to reflect on. It's, of course, what I'm asking you to do for creative analysis, but it's also what you're doing for your papers. Everything should be scene-driven. Scene with S-E. S-C, sorry, S-C-E-N-E. Everything is about the page. I know from my reading that Janie is attracted to both Joe Starks and tea cake. I know she marries both of them, and I know in both cases they represent a bee to a bloom. If I simply stay with my ideas, my argument will be fine. It will probably be accurate, but it will not be novel, and it will not be compelling to me, the writer, either. I'll already know what I think, and I'll just be telling you what I think. That is not the point. The point is to dig in and find more interesting things to say, always. And that's what you're doing in your papers this week. So for that, we need to go to the language. Syntax, diction, figurative language. And that is here. I've got two scenes, and I've written them out. I am trying to understand what is going on in these scenes, but I am so tightly focused on the language, not on my impression of the whole scene. So on the left-hand side, I have Joe Starks and the description that we get of him when Janie meets him for the first time. And on the right-hand side, I have tea cake and what we get about him the first time Janie meets tea cake. Contrasts. And so similar, they're both two men in Janie's life, and she marries them both. But what is different? Where are the tensions? Where are the pieces of evidence that I can begin to collect to show you what I really think about these characters? Now, I'm going to pause. This is what I'm asking you to do for your creative analysis, is find a couple of passages and tell us for a paragraph, what did you notice when you were contrasting these scenes? And that is, of course, what I'm about to show you. But I want you to think for a moment about your papers. You have assertions that you're going to make. I've already read through your ideas, and I can even say some of those ideas here. Lila's looking at Hamlet and the way that he is actually delusional, convincing himself of things that might not be true. Eden is looking at the story of an hour and the way that Kate Chopin's main character is not necessarily just a callous and immoral woman. And so on and so on and so on. The questions I have for all of you is, where on the page do you see it? Where on the page are your ideas? And that brings me to the organization lecture. So there's creative analysis. You're finding two passages. You're writing a paragraph where you explore some of these questions. What is similar about them? What tension does it reveal? What does the diction, syntax, and figurative language reveal? But then, in your papers, always it's about evidence. And I'm going to use last week's slide with line of reasoning to show you the exact same thing works with evidence. A strong line of reasoning is going to help the writer come up with better ideas, right? That's the point. But that's also true of evidence. A strong set of evidence will build in an ascending ladder to your best idea. This is simply called good defense of an argument. A good defense has power beyond itself, and this is the big takeaway for me. Not because you prove your argument better to me, or to anyone reading your paper. Not because you win, but because it gives you, the writer, more creativity, more confidence, and frankly, more speed. I mean, that matters in the timed write. Evidence is not primarily for the reader. It is for you, the writer. When you're digging into evidence, when you're trying to pull apart the pieces on the page, you are going to find so many more interesting concepts to explore. All right. I think we teach evidence the wrong way. I think we teach it in a lawyerly sense. Go about collecting the pieces of your argument so that you can win in your argument. When in literary analysis, what are we even winning? It's not about winning. It's not about proving ourselves. It is about finding your ideas in evidence. Here's what I've got when I go back to those passages that I was contrasting. I see things about Joe that I didn't notice the first time. He is a citified, stylish dressed man with an angle that didn't belong. And now I'm realizing he's a little unnatural. He's a little otherworldly. That's going to come back around in another scene I'm thinking about when he does put a streetlight in the town to replicate the sun. And so he is not the bee to the bloom. He is not the natural organic union Janie is seeking. He is exciting. He is dazzling. But he is not organic in the way that Janie is wanting him to be, or wanting anyone to be. And then we have the shirt with the silk sleeve holders. Notice that alliteration, right? Figurative language, just kind of popping. It's kind of enchanting. It was dazzling enough for the world. He is dressed to impress, not to hold Janie in his arms, but to stand above her on a stage. Interesting. He stops and he looks hard at her, and he asks her for a cool drink of water. So he immediately needs something from her. That's interesting, because that's going to set the structure for their relationship throughout. He needs her to be a certain way in order for his world to work for him. That lasts throughout the entire marriage, and it is why Janie is so free when she finally gets to leave. And then the last detail that I think, wow, I can't believe I didn't catch that the first time. I can't believe the warning bells weren't going off in my mind. Maybe in a dim sense they were, but when I go back and I seek evidence, I realize Joe is problematic for Janie because he talks for a long time before he asks her a question. Wow, we learn a lot about him through that little piece of evidence. He is trying to put on a presentation. He's trying to put on a show. He is trying to win her. It's not about Janie, who she is, how she's going to reveal herself to him. And indeed, he never really becomes too interested in all of that. She is a prize, and he wants to win the prize. Now, tea cake. And you could do the same argument. You could do this without me talking through it. So I'm just going to skip to my last part that I like. But you can see all of that, and you can pause the slide. When I look into the detailed evidence for tea cake and how they meet for the first time, All along that conversation, it is about Janie as much as it's about tea cake. It's a real partnership. And in the very last moment, she even knows it. She says she found herself glowing inside. Somebody wanted her to play. Someone thought it was natural, that word, natural, for her to play. He is trying to engage her. Joe Starks is trying to win her. Tea Cake is trying to engage her. He's trying to interact with her, to pull her out of her shell. It's as important to him as Janie's perception of him is. So all of this is mere evidence, right? But I could write a whole paper just about these two scenes because I have dialed deeply into the evidence. All of this is to say, for your papers, check for evidence. And it's a visual check. As you go through your body paragraphs, I imagine you'll have probably 5 body paragraphs. Every body paragraph should contain quotes. If it doesn't have quotes, that reveals a body paragraph without evidence. It means it's just a paragraph with your ideas, fine, but they won't be at the ground level. The only time you want to go to the 30,000-foot view is the intro and the conclusion, where it's very appropriate not to have quotations. But for the argument, you want to be on the ground. That is the lecture for both things. I'm done here with the general speak about these papers, and I wish you the best, but definitely reach out to me if you're at all confused about how to find that evidence for your particular argument. All right, done.